Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to the US once again, and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel a number of times before, albeit we're going to have a look at a beer from one of their brands that has never featured on the channel before. So this particular brand of beer is actually best known for the different kinds of Belgian ales, both sour beers and Abbey styles, but the beer we're having a look at today is a style that I would not have expected to find from them. It's a style of beer that I very much enjoy, one that's growing increasingly popular at the moment, and it's also a sub-style that I very much enjoy too, and you don't find this sub-style all that often. So when I found this beer over in Copenhagen, I was really surprised and just thought, I have to review this one. So yeah, needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to San Diego in the southern part of California over on the American West Coast, and we're going to have a look at my first beer on the channel from the Lost Abbey. So this particular beer is called Mopeds in Milan. It comes in at 5% ABV, and this one is an Italian-style Pilsner. So for those of you who don't know, an Italian-style Pilsner tends to just be a little bit more kind of hoppy and floral, but they can be very nice. I guess the kind of benchmark of this style would be the Tipo Pils from Birrificio Italiano. That's one that you really need to try if you're interested in this particular style of beer. And there have been many Swedish breweries actually have done their own kind of clones of this beer and then released them commercially. So yeah, this is the very first time as well that I'm trying an Italian style Pilsner from the US, but I know there are some very, very good lager breweries over there just now, and I have really been getting into lagers again over the last sort of 2-3 years, something like this. But my whole love of beer began with German beer, of course, so this is quite a natural kind of fallback for me, if you like. But yeah, this beer was bought at Kiosk over in Copenhagen, which I highly recommend that you check out. They did also have a Czech Pilsner that I was curious about, but yeah, as I say, I'd never seen an American brewed Italian style Pilsner, so that was what caught my interest with this one, and definitely cool to feature the Lost Abbey brand on the channel for the first time too. But let's crack on with this beer then and see what it has in store for us. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the history of the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to the Lost Abbey brand website as well, and also a link to my future reviews that hopefully I can do from Lost Abbey too. Very first time this brand is featuring on the channel, as I mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. Just go up to the search bar, put your hometown, state, county, province, whatever you like in there, and if I've reviewed beers from your local area, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There are ones there for many different countries, but you'll find this one in the American playlist along with many other things. But yeah, let's go on and have a little look at my brewery notes then and tell you a little bit about the Lost Abbey and of course the Pizza Port Brewing Company, where this brewery kind of finds its roots, if you like. So, the Lost Abbey is one of the 4 beer brands produced by the same brewery in San Marco in California. This is Pizza Port Brewing, Lost Abbey, of course, Hop Concept, Port Brewing, and Tiny Bubbles Brewing. And the history of this, as I say, it does go back to the founding of Pizza Port Brewing. So Pizza Port Brewing are based in San Diego in California. The company was founded by the siblings Gina and Vince Marsaglia, and they bought a struggling pizza place in Solana Beach back in March of 1987. So they had some free space in the premises, and in this free space, Vince experimented with home brewing, and a few years later they installed a 7-barrel brew kit, and the first beers were produced in October of 1992 under the Pizza Port Brewing brand. But over the years, these guys have continued to expand their brewing operations. They've also added more restaurants and more beers to their repertoire as well, and things have been going very well for them. So Vince had always been a big fan of the Belgian Abbey style beers, and he dreamed of brewing these, but this remains just a kind of idea until Thomas Arthur was hired and he started brewing at Pizza Port back in 1997. But in November of that year they produced the Dubbel, and then a number of other Belgian style beers came quickly after this. But later in 2000 2005, Stone moved out of their facility in San Marcos, and so Vince, Gina and Tommy teamed up to take over the brewery. And when they started working there, it was decided that this brewery would produce two different lines of beer. So this would be Port Brewing Company, who would do the kind of classic Californian, American style craft beers, and then Lost Abbey, which would produce the Belgian style beers, both sour and kind of more Abbey style things. But the doors to this brewery opened in 2006, and they started off with a 30 barrel brewing system, and they've amassed a library of over 1,000 different barrels in their barrel aging program. But they've continually expanded and won many awards over the years, and today they have 3 tap rooms. So this is the tasting room in San Marcos, the confessional in Cardiff by the Sea, and also the sanctuary in San Elijo, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But the first beer was released from the Hop concept line in 2014, and then the Tiny Bubbles brand was added to their portfolio in 2019 after the rights were purchased from Hollister Brewing, and this Tiny Bubbles brand is going to focus mainly on kind of modern sour beers, you know, the Berliner Weisses, the Goses, the smoothie sours, and all of these kind of things. But Hop Concept mainly does different kinds of IPAs and experiments with things like that. But today they've produced around 135 different beers under the Lost Abbey name, 120 under the Port Brewing Company name, and then there's about 50 or so under Hop Concept and just a few under the Tiny Bubbles brand. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Pizza Port Brewing and the expansion to produce the Port Brewing beers and also the Lost Abbey ones, and then Hop Concept and Tiny Bubbles. So I hope that kind of ties everything together for you guys watching it quite nicely. But yeah, of course, if you want to learn more about any of these brands, you can check out the website that I've put in the video description for you below. You can follow them on social media, of course, or you can check out the Untappd pages for each beer brand, and they'll see the list of all the different beers that they've done. So yeah, that's everything. Let's get on and actually have a little look at this beer itself. So, as you can see, the artwork on this one is very, very nice. You've got a sort of hologram, well, what would you call that? Kind of shiny Vespa moped there. I think the Vespas are Italian, of course, but there you can see gold top on the can. You can see the Lost Abbey symbol on the back of the can here, and it does tell you a little bit about the beer as well. So it says, there's no better way to get around a beautiful city like Milan than on a bike. Sure, you may miss a thing here or there, but that's just extra motivation to go back. Enjoy our take on an Italian Pilsner, clean and refreshing, with just enough of a hoppy bite to remind you we made it. So yeah, the hops in this one are Hallertau Tradition, which we know is about 4.5% alpha acid. That's going to give you, German noble hops always give you this lovely kind of bright floral and grassy character, but they've also got a little bit of smoothness to them as well. And you've got Hallertau Blanc in there, which is one of the new generation of German hops, about 11% alpha acid. It still has the noble character, of course, but it gives you this lovely kind of oily gooseberry type character to it as well. But yeah, this can is 473 millilitres, which is 1 American pint, and I believe, I can't remember how many Danish kroner I paid for this one. I think it might have been about 60 Danish kroner. So that translates to roughly 90 Swedish, about €9, maybe £8 sterling, something like $10 American for this. But of course, we have to remember it is an import. It was bought in Denmark, where it is a bit more expensive and the currency is very strong just now. But like I say, an Italian Pilsner from the Lost Abbey. I just thought this would be a very cool beer to review. So yeah, 5% Italian style Pilsner, Mopeds in Milan, from the Lost Abbey in San Marcos in San Diego in California. Let's get this guy out into the glass and see what we have here. Very, very curious about this. This should be quite nice. Yes, let me just line the can up again so that it looks nice for the video and my OCD is happy. So yeah, there we go. So, as you can see, this beer is poured pretty much as you would expect from any kind of Pilsner. So before the head disappears, I think it's safe to say this one is poured with about a 1 finger frothy white head. I think it is perfect white actually. I wouldn't even say that it's slightly creamy. It does look perfect white. You can see there's a mixture of very small kind of foamy bubbles on the bottom there and slightly bigger ones as you go further up toward the top there. But you've got a lovely kind of pale golden straw colour to this one, although it is very kind of bright, to be honest with you. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on, one, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put in will affect the colour of your beer as well. But when it comes to Pilsners, it's not often that you're going to barrel age them or anything like that. But yeah, this beer certainly looks as you would expect from a Pilsner. 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there. But overall, it does look very, very nice. But lovely, kind of hazy, bright golden colour of this one. It has got a little bit of that lovely natural haze to it. You can see if I put my fingers behind the glass there, the beer does look very, very nice actually. Yeah. I don't think there's anything else we really need to say about the appearance of this one. It looks very, very nice. So we've poured, just so you're aware, we've poured a little bit under 400 millilitres into this one. So maybe about 380 or something like that. So there's probably about 80% of the can is in the glass at the moment. But let's have a wee look at the aroma of this beer and see what it's all about. Very, very curious about this one. That does smell very, very nice, I have to say that. Yeah, aroma-wise, this beer, pretty much what you'd expect from the style. It's not going to do anything unusual. You know, knowing Lost Abbey, these guys, you know, these guys are very, very true to the styles, but they just, you know, pack a little bit more flavour and things in them. But I will say, this beer does smell very, very nice, actually. Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm hoping. When it comes to Pilsners and things like this, what you want is for them to be true to the style and well brewed, and I've got no doubt that this will be the case with this one. But yeah, you do get a little bit more oily, fruity character out of this one, which will be from the Hallertau Blanc. And yeah, it gives you everything else you'd expect. So let's just sugar this beer up and try and break down the aroma that little bit more. So, the backbone of the beer, you've got a lovely little bit of kind of fresh, white bready bread crust in there, which I really do quite enjoy. So as I say, fresh, white bready bread crust. On top of that, there's a little bit of Jacob's cream cracker coming out of this one. One thing I should point out about this beer as well, I think I didn't say that earlier, I just noticed on the back of the can, this one actually uses Weirmann German malt, which is interesting for an American brewery, I have to say, because it'd be quite expensive to import that all the way over to California. But still, interesting. So, yeah. The bread crusty notes on this are really nice. You've got a little bit of Jacob's cream cracker in there as well, and you also have, yeah, you've also got a good little bit of kind of fluffy white bread coming out of this beer too, which I have to say is very, very nice. So yeah, bread crust, Jacob's cream cracker, fluffy white bread, and then above that, you actually have, you can smell there's a little bit of sweetness too. There's almost, I want to say there's a little touch of an almost kind of wholemeal brown bready character to this one. There is a little bit of a sweeter grainy side to this beer. But yeah, in the middle of the, yeah, in the middle of this, in the middle of this, in the middle of the nose with this beer, there's certainly a little bit of sweetness. I do get a little touch of almost like honey type character out of this one, but then you get the more kind of biscuity McVitie's digestive type notes out of this one. I don't know how good a reference that is for Americans that would watch this video, but certainly for me, yeah, McVitie's digestive's kind of sweeter. Biscuits, of course, the Americans would call them cookies, but that's another thing. We're not going to go into the Scottish English versus American English debate. That's another thing. Because you guys know I don't like this whole fluid ounce thing either. The American liquid measurement system makes no sense to me. Use metric, guys, come on. Not freedom units. But anyway, the other thing I noticed about this beer too is you do get a little bit of the Pilsner malt dryness in the top of the nose, which is quite nice, and that again is something that you do expect of this beer. But like I say, generally speaking, Italian Pilsners, the focus is more on the fact that they are a little bit more hoppy, which is interesting. I'm sure there are probably some Italian varieties of hops actually, but that's something I would need to look into a little bit more actually. Something I've not really come across, but I need to try some more Italian beers on the channel. That's something I do need to try and sort out this year, because I've been promising that for a while. But yeah, malty wise, this beer is pretty nice actually. So let's have a wee look at the hoppy side of this beer then. So as I was saying earlier, this beer, the green component is pretty typical German noble character. You've got that lovely little bit of smooth earthiness in there. This one actually does have a little bit more of a potent floral character to it, and that will be because of the presence of Hallertau Blanc. It's 11% alpha acid, if I'm remembering correctly. But yeah, you do get that little bit more of a kind of bright, pungent floral character. There's also some nice kind of grassy, zesty notes in there, which I think are great. And yeah, the way everything goes together in this beer is just very, very nice. Yeah, aroma-wise, this beer, I think, goes together very, very well. Yeah, aroma-wise, this beer is lovely in that sense. I love the kind of brighter, grassy floral notes in there. I love the big... I just love the pungency that it's got, and you've also got that little bit of earthiness behind it. And a wee bit of herbal character starts to come out of this beer as well, but then you also have that nice oily gooseberry type character as well. There is a little bit of a kind of peary note in this one for me too, which is quite interesting. But overall, it smells like a very, very nice beer actually, so it gets a big thumbs up from me in that sense. Gives you everything you would expect of the Italian Pilsner, that extra hoppiness, but it's got that more oily, fruity character to it, the oily gooseberry kind of thing, because of the presence of Hallertau Blanc. So yeah, let's have a look at this one then and see what it's going to have. But as I always say, take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma of these beers before you get stuck in. But let's look at this. So this one is Mopeds in Milan, a 5% Italian-style Pilsner from the Lost Abbey, part of the Pizza Port Brewing Group, if we can call it that, in San Marcos near San Diego in California. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers, or since we're talking about Milan, salute. Oh, that is nice. That is very nice, actually. Very, first impression, quite an oily, very smooth Pilsner actually, and the bitterness comes out a wee bit later on, but very easy to drink, I will say that. Get the rest of it out. Have a wee look at this properly, but yeah, this beer was rated I think 3.8 when I had a little quick look on Untappd earlier, which is very good for a lager, of course. You know, Untappd is a little bit biased toward IPAs and imperial stouts and stuff like that, but this beer is very, very nice in that sense. I can really feel, just sitting here and enjoying the aftertaste a little bit, you do get the you can just feel the bitterness building, and of course that is what you want from an Italian Pilsner. So yeah, gives you as I say, it gives you everything you would want from this style. So thumbs up to Lost Abbey for this beer. Yeah. Yeah. So let's break this down and describe it for you that wee bit more in depth then. So it's, as I say, quite an oily, good bitterness, and kind of it's got that little bit of oily, fruity character to it as well, which is kind of what I was expecting for the aroma. This is one of these beers where the aroma and the actual flavour that you get kind of play into each other really well. So on that side of things then, middle third of your palate, you can feel the backbone of the beer. You've got that lovely little bit of kind of fresh white bready bread crust in there, and that is the backbone of the beer. The further back on the palate, of course, you go, the more grainy it becomes. But yeah, toward the front of that middle third of your palate, you've got a little bit of a woody character coming out of this one. So yeah, a little bit of kind of fresh white bready character coming out of this one as well. So yeah, you've got the bread crust, you've got a little bit of woodiness toward the front of that middle third of your palate. Then on top of that, you have a little bit more of on top of that, you've got the fluffy white bread, and well, no, actually, before that, above the bread crust and the woodiness, you've got a little bit of Jacob's cream cracker, getting a little touch of that. Then you've got a very slight layer, very kind of slight thin layer of like a wholemeal brown bready character. Then you start to get the fluffy white bready notes out of the beer. And the other thing I would say is that the Pilsner malt you get in this one actually has quite a bit of dryness to it. I get a lot of dryness out of this beer, particularly the further into the aftertaste you go, but it matches up well with the kind of hoppiness and things. Yeah. So yeah, the way that that goes together is very, very nice. Yeah. The above the kind of above the white bready layer, like I say, you've got a few things going on. So at the back of that middle third of your palate, you start to get the really kind of dry Pilsner malty characteristics. But then further forward, you've got a circle in the you've got a little circle in that right in the dead centre of your palate where you've got the McVitie's digestive biscuit underneath, and you can feel that as you go out toward the edges of the palate, the biscuity character gets a wee bit kind of sweeter. But then in the dead centre of your palate, you've got a wee bit more of a kind of honey. There's a little touch of a slightly more sweet honey type vibe out of this beer, which I do quite like. Yeah. It's a very nice, as I say, it's a very, very nicely done Pilsner. Quite a wet one, this, for me. But of course, you've got different water profiles all across the world. So, you know, this is a lot of the reason for the differences in flavour profiles that you get with these beers. And yeah, because I mean, the water for me with this one is very... I don't know if they'll treat their water, of course, at the brewery, because some breweries do that to get you the water profile from, say, Bamberg or Milan or whatever. You know, some breweries will do that. I don't know if these guys do, and I don't know how common that is in American craft brewing, right enough. But here in Europe, I don't think it's all that common, because especially here in Scandinavia and back home in Scotland, we don't tend to treat our water. We don't have to, because it's very good quality. But yeah, that's one thing I'm thinking with this beer. The malty base in this one is quite oily, and the whole beer feels quite wet in that sense. But I like it. I really do like how it goes together. I think we've said everything, to be honest, that we really need to about the middle third of the palate in this beer. So let's have a wee look at the back third of the palate then. So the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you do get a nice kind of bready build up in there. Yeah, you get that nice little bit of bready build up in there. There's a little bit of a kind of Pilsnery, as I say, you get the Pilsner malty dryness in there, which is great. And then you've got the back of that, the back third of the palate here. You've got that nice kind of, how would we say? You've got that nice kind of bread crusty base, and again, that's a little bit more grainy for me. More grainy and bitter flavours always come out further back on the palate, so you can feel the bread crusty layer is there, but it's a little bit drier. On top of that, you've got the Jacob's cream cracker layer, which again is a little bit drier. Then above all of that, there's a little layer of a wholemeal brown bread, which I think is a little bit taller on that back third of the palate. Then you've got the white bready layer as well, which is great. And then above all of that, you have the above all of that, you've just the big fluffy white bready layer. Then you start to get some of the kind of more, you can feel the Pilsner malty dryness sitting on top of all of that once again, which is nice. But yeah, like I say, the way this beer goes together, I think, is really quite nice. Above all of that, you start to get a little bit of this kind of farmhousey bready character as well, which I think goes together really well. And it's got a little touch of honeycomb too. I always get honeycomb in that back third of the palate, but you can definitely feel that the back third of your palate, the flavour is taller. Then as you come further forward into the middle third of the palate, the flavour just squashes down and condenses together that little bit. So yeah, that is quite nice with this one, I have to say. But yeah, I think that covers the malty side of this beer, to be honest with you. The one thing I would say as well is that the Italian Pils as a style is very interesting. Remember, of course, this is a lager beer, so bottom fermenting yeast, lower temperature fermentation. This style originates in Pilsen in the Czech Republic, and then of course the Italian style Pilsners tend to be a little bit more hoppy and dry and things like this. The German style Pilsners as well for me are a little bit cleaner and more crisp, whereas the Czech Pilsners are actually quite yeasty and quite smooth in some ways, but still a little bit more kind of bitter and hoppy. Those are the three variants of Pilsners for me that you can that you can really get. And this one really does show the Italian side very well. You have to comment on that with this beer because it is American brewed. It has the authenticity of this style pretty much down to a T, and it's got the lightness that you want of a lager and of a Pilsner too. So yeah, they've done a really nice job of this, and they're not known for the lagers, but it kind of goes to show you that how popular the lager styles are becoming. So yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, so back corners of the palate, you've got that nice little bit of earthiness in there. As you move further forward, it gets a little bit herbal, but then you start to get a lot of floral character out of this beer. This beer actually does have a good little bit of bitterness to it, and as I said, that is a characteristic, an inherent characteristic of an Italian Pilsner, and the Hallertau Blanc is probably the one that's going to be a bit responsible for this slightly more spicy floral character that's coming out of this one. Because the Hallertau, the regular Hallertau tops, or Hallertau Tradition, as this one is, they are normally not quite as bitter as this one, just because of the lower alpha acid content. Alpha acids, of course, determine how bitter your hops are. The beta acids kind of determine how long the bitterness can stay in the beer for. I guess that's a good way to put it. But yeah, you can feel you've got a big kind of floral spiciness there towards the front corners of your palate, but round the front curve of the tongue, the beer is distinctly lighter and more grassy. There's a little touch of zestiness to it there as well. So yeah. But yeah, on the green cabana, I think that's everything we need to say. And like I said earlier, the bitterness in this beer does build up a wee bit more into the aftertaste. But yeah, on the kind of the front third of your palate then, the fruity side of things, let's look at that. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you do get a little bit of bready build up in there, and there's a wee bit of Pilsner malty dryness. The base of that front third of your palate, there's bread crust in there, there's a bit of cracker, and there's also a wee bit of a smooth white bready sort of thing. Above that, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So yeah, I think that goes together really quite nicely. Yeah, this the base of the front third of your palate on this is quite nice, but this beer, in terms of fruitiness, it's pretty much exactly what I would have expected. At the back of that front third of your palate, there's a wee bit of like a yeah, there is a wee bit of a more like a sort of sultana type thing, and then a little bit more of like a dry apricot as you reach the middle of that front third of your palate. But then as you move into the front half of the front third of your palate, that kind of oily fruity bubble where the fruity esters roll their way out, it's more about the gooseberry, and you do get a little touch of like a limey zestiness underneath. So yeah, a lot of gooseberry from the Hallertau Blanc on the very front part of your palate with this beer, and then a good little bit of lemon limey zestiness, which I have to say I do quite enjoy. So yeah, the way this beer goes together, I think, is very, very nice. So yeah, this one, I have enjoyed this. I've obviously been sipping on this one to try and get all the flavour out of it, but a Pilsner is of course something you would have in a tankard in session, a wee bit more actually. So yeah, I was in two minds as to whether I should put this in my PU glass and kind of enjoy it that way. But yeah, I tend to always use that. You can't really go wrong with these tulip glasses because they are the best all-rounders, I would say. But yeah, in terms of what you would expect from an Italian Pilsner, I think this is very nicely done. And it does give you that kind of big bitterness that you want too. So yeah, an Italian style Pilsner, but done with German hops and German malts apparently. So that's quite interesting. I don't know how easy it is to import Italian hops and things, and like I say, I need to build my knowledge on Italian hops that little bit more anyway. But yeah, I think we've said everything we need to about the flavour of this beer. Let's go on and just round off with the mouthfeel. So as I've said a few times in this video, for me, this beer is quite it really is quite it's quite a wet Pilsner for me, to be honest with you. It's quite wet and it's slightly oily. So yeah, nice big, it does have a good little bit of wetness to it, a good little bit of oily character, as I've said, and yeah, it kind of gives me everything I would want in that particular regard. But yeah, for me, It's the carbonation in this one is very, very smooth. It's got a little bit of an oily character to it in combination with wetness. And it has got, it gives you everything you would want from the Italian Pilsner, to be quite honest with you. But yeah, like I say, quite wet and a little bit more oily. In terms of IBUs, this has got to be, it's at least 30, but it could be pushing 40. I wouldn't be surprised if it's 40 IBUs, but always take my IBU counts with a pinch of salt because it's my weakest point of beer reviewing. So I think about 40 IBUs. The malt base has a bit of dryness to it. It's got a bit of smoothness, a slight little bit of sweetness, but you have that Pilsner malt dryness that you would expect of the style too. And in terms of the fruitiness of this beer, it has got a bit of oiliness to it, but it also has that little bit of zesty character as well, which I certainly enjoy. But yeah, I do like how all of this pieces together, and it's a very nicely done Italian style Pilsner. This one gives you everything you would want from the style, and yeah, have to just compliment Lost Abbey on this. A style they're not really well known for, but they have pulled it off very, very nicely. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this review. This was the Mopeds in Milan, a 5% Italian style Pilsner from Lost Abbey, part of the Pizza Port Brewing Company group in San Diego in Southern California over in the US. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Lost Abbey and Pizza Port Brewing Company group, whatever you like, in the comment section below as well. But thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out their social media, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Really cool to review my first American brewed Italian style Pilsner. Sláinte, skål, cheers, and see you guys in the next review.